So, hi everyone. So, welcome to Innovation Tech Community. So, last week we discussed about the basic concept of the Azure OpenAI services. So, today we gone through the second part of the Azure OpenAI services and the governance and everything. And so, once again, Inai will be with us to hold, so you can discuss more details about the second part of the Azure OpenAI services. So, so So now this. So one second, guys. So I would like to ask. Yeah. So this is stage is yours.
The call. So today I'll be continuing on our previous discussion 2 weeks back that I had a very brief discussion about or overview about Azure OpenAI Service. So today I'll going to be briefly covering what we covered and then mainly diving into the security aspects, and we'll look at a couple of use cases that where OpenAI is applicable or mostly asked in various different scenarios. And we'll dive into some coding, look into some code aspects of it as well. So let's jump into that one without any further delay. If there are any questions, feel free to put that in the chat, and then I can address either during the call or after the presentation is done. So let's quickly recap what we did cover last week. Let me go ahead and switch that. Okay. So last week we just briefly covered where OpenAI service fits from history perspective, where generative AI is been a new stuff that has been coming into the light after the deep learning and machine learning stuff has been around for many years. So now generative AI has been a new trend, which is again creative nature of some of the AI stuff that we have been looking into, right? So I don't want to dive too much into this one. Just quickly want to skim through and then we can look into the new material that we are planning to do. There are different models we talked about. There are GPT-3 model, which is more from textual side of it. And we have a codex model, which covers the code aspects of it, DALL-E model, which again covers generating the images and stuff like that. We also covered briefly about where the service sits. This is part of the cognitive services. OpenAI service is part of that. We already have other services as well. So we briefly covered on that one as well. I'll skip on this one since we already know what Azure OpenAI service is all about, what benefit it brings, the platform benefits and scalability, security, and all those things are now offered as part of Azure. So OpenAI service is part of that. So all the benefits that you can leverage as part of any Azure services, now you can leverage alongside with the OpenAI service. Key concept, these are again very important. When we're going to go through some demos, you're going to see some concepts around prompts, which is something you send it to OpenAI, and then you're getting the response back. Token is the limits that you normally, it's all your pricing aspects of it is all driven through the tokens. So how many tokens you can send to and getting the response is combination of sending and request and response, all combination gears towards the token. So there is each model has certain limits that applicable to that particular model, how many tokens you can use and what is the size of the prompt request and response you can get. We also briefly cover about the embeddings. We're going to see some example of embeddings as well today, which basically is a vector representation of your text that you are sending. And basically you use that to compare certain similarities and all those kind of stuff using those embeddings results, and then applying cosine similarity, you can see how close two text are. Completions we also talk about. Again, this is an endpoint used for different tasks that you are performing. So it's very simple, but again, more powerful text in, text out kind of a scenario. So as a completion is used, you're going to see some example of that as well. We also briefly covered about responsible AI. where content filtering is and fine-tuning aspects of it, where if you want to adjust certain biases and weights of your model, then you use fine-tuning. In that case, again, the guideline is use the prompt engineering as much as possible. Fine-tuning is something you not necessarily need that majority of the time. Proper fine-tuning of your prompts itself meets most of your needs, right? So just keep that in mind as well. So I'm going to skip this one. Some of these examples here, the token limits, what each model is capable of doing. Again, DaVinci is the most powerful one model that we have. And all these other models are there as well, but they are not as powerful as DaVinci. They can do specific tasks, but they are more performant and faster in many cases, cost effective. Some of these lower level models, right? But DaVinci is the most powerful and complex model that we have. Let's get through this one. So I'm going to get into your security slide, which is what I'm. Right. Let's see. All right. So I just want to briefly cover today on the data privacy aspects of it. So here's a high-level process. You can also find this slide, this particular picture in the documentation as well. And what this covers is the process where abuse monitoring or content filtering is applied. So when you search for any prompts or any prompts that you are sending and you are getting the response back, that prompts goes through certain channels behind the scene when you call the OpenAI service. And basically what it does is there are a series of ensemble models behind the scene which really performs various different activities looking into some your text that you are sending, whether there is any privacy aspects of it or something that is not appropriate contents that should have been filtered from your request and response. So that's where this sets of model which sits behind the scene, which goes through that process. So before, when you send the response and the response that you send a request and the response that you get back, it goes through the same process here. Now, again, I have been seeing that, so there are two aspects there. So one is abuse monitoring, where if any abusive content has been identified, it records that abusive nature of that payload into your storage account, and then also it triggers an alarm, right? Or alert, it triggers that, and it sends the alert to a Microsoft as well as the company whose this environment has been set it up. It also notifies them as well. So again, there is a human review process is involved. And this is something I have been seeing customer asking, okay, is there a Microsoft person sitting there reviewing there? In general, nobody's really sitting and reviewing what you are sending and stuff like that. But if some abusive content is been triggered, in that case, the notification is sent, and then basically with the joint interaction with Microsoft and the company side or customer side, they will gonna look into that if needed, based after getting the permission from that customer, and then looking into what triggered that and what you can do to avoid that. But many customers, I have been seeing this as well. In some cases, we don't want that human Microsoft side of the human reviewing our contents. In that case, what you can do is you can opt out from that, right? So there is a request form which has two options there. You can opt out from abuse monitoring, or you can opt out from content filtering, or you can opt out from both, right? And what it does is when you opt out from abuse monitoring, in that case, no record has been collected at all, and no alarming alert has been sent out to anybody. In that case, basically, if you need to do some log tracing and all this kind of stuff, you won't be able to do that since you are not doing any log tracking. We are opting out from that. In that case, you are going to lose that functionality. In case of certain times I have been seeing also is people want to only keep the content filtering. They don't want to have this abuse monitoring turned on. So You can also do that as well. You can still keep the content filtering, but only the monitoring part, human monitoring part, if you want to get rid of it, you can also do that. So that's, I just wanted to briefly highlight that this option is available. You have to submit the request and you can opt out from there. Now, jumping into the next slide, I briefly touched base on this one. Again, this is a very common question I've been also hearing from various customers about what are the different levels of governance and controls you can put in place. And I mentioned about this one where one of the customer who does not want everybody to start creating their OpenAI service, and they need some control over because of the cost purposes. They want to centrally monitoring the overall budgetary aspects of it, control, security, and all those aspects of it. So they only want to have a limited sets of OpenAI service provision, but also they want a central governance where anybody who want to request any OpenAI service, they want to review that before anybody can start go and create that. So that level of control that they want, and they want to limit those subscription creation. So that's a very high that I've been seeing some customers want that level of control and they want to restrict that. The way you able to do that is using the Azure policy. And I'm going to show you the example, quick example of that as well. And the other level is your resource group. So again, you can also apply the same policy at the resource group level. And at OpenAI service level, you can also apply a certain, there are built-in roles there as well, but there are certain roles which are, you can also customize that as well. So you can put a custom role, you can put a custom permissions on it, and then you can assign certain peoples to that. So we can quickly take a look into that as well. And then the last is the API management layer. This is again, if you want to control user access a little bit more fine grain level, you want to control the rate limits and stuff like that. This is where management layer comes into the play, and more enterprise scenarios, this API management makes more sense where you can have better monitoring capabilities and rate limits and all those kind of stuff. Certain groups you can create and assign permissions for certain APIs they can call and stuff like that. You can control all that through the API management. So again, this is a very high level view of the governance and control side of it. So let's quickly take a look into the first one that I mentioned about the Azure policy. So what you normally do is, if you have permission at a certain level, you can create a policy, and basically you go and search for policy on the top here, and then basically it brings up this particular screen here. And what you can do is you define you create a definition, policy definition. In my case, I did create a very quick policy definition here. And what I'm defining it here is, here's a policy definition for a particular resource, which is of an OpenAI kind, which falls under the Azure Cognitive Services. And again, you can control various aspects of it here. You can say which region they can provision it. You can also control which model people can provision, right? So you can also specify additional attributes here. Say, here are the list of models that people can provision, right? So you can control that level. So once you define this definition, you assign this definition to as part of the assignments, you go and assign this to a particular resource, right? In my case, I already assigned that to a particular resource group. So now if you go and try to create this particular policy in that resource group, it will gonna restrict you from creating any of this OpenAI resource. So basically the way this works is, if somebody wants to create any of this resource, they have to submit a request, for example, and somebody centrally says, well, okay, your use case is valid. We will let you create this OpenAI service, and they will gonna be giving you the exemptions in this case for that particular resource group to create that OpenAI service, right? So this is a very high level process. I just wanted to briefly mention to you that this is available for folks to control it at a higher level. Now let's take a quickly look at the other area which I mentioned about, was creating or a custom role, right? So I'm pretty sure most of you have been using some of these built-in roles, but you can also go and create your custom roles. In this case, I have created a custom role here. Let's see. There should be an OpenAI custom. Yeah, so here. So what I did was I did create a custom role. And basically the way it works is you take an existing role, whichever is closer, you basically go and clone that role. And then once you clone that role and provide that name, custom name, and what you do is you have one new entry here with a custom role. And basically what you go and do is add it in that particular custom role. And then in the permissions, you can assign a various difference related to OpenAI. For example, if you search here for OpenAI, it falls under cognitive services, And here you can see a list of OpenAI permissions that you can custom permission you can set, right? So again, you have more finer grain control. You can put in place what a certain sets of individual can do. So again, if you don't necessarily this level of control, if your reader and contributor role is sufficient, but if you need a little more fine grained control where you want to have somebody to restrict what they can do, like for example, some people cannot access keys, or some people cannot even list out certain things, or fine stuff if they don't want to have some people to delete fine tuning and stuff like that. You can control all these different sets of permissions at a very fine grain level if needed. So I just want to make sure this option is available for folks to configure it as needed. So once you assign whichever permission that you want to give, you can select that, click add, and basically what you have it here is a list of permission that you want to grant. You just review and update. And basically once you have that role created, you can assign sets of user to that particular role, and then that level of permission are being granted to that level of to the user or sets of users. So again, that's another level here. I don't have a setup for API management, but this is, again, you can read up. This is a completely separate topic. You can set up an API management. Again, OpenAI is REST-based. Everything is really API-based. So you can set your API management service. You can point to your cognitive service API, and then you can further manage and control all these aspects of it. So I just briefly wanted to cover this area, and let's quickly jump on a quick use case before I jump on the code. So let me switch back to the. So again, I have been seeing many use cases, but most use cases I have been seeing so far, people have been asking in some form is using the cognitive search blended with OpenAI. So the main use case here is you could potentially have your document scanned or indexed from various different sources. It could be audio file. It could be, again, some transcript. For example, in call center scenario, where you have call center, people are calling, you are recording that call, and then basically what you do is you apply some cognitive service or any other out of some other services that you are using, convert that audio into a text, and then basically you store that text into a storage account, and you apply your cognitive search on it. Basically, you scan that particular script, and then basically that script is available by searching capabilities on top. Now, once you have that searching capability, in some cases, you may also, let's say, scan PDF as well. And what you may do is you can apply certain other cognitive skill set on top of it, which basically supplements that information with your, for example, what is the sentiment of that particular text, or if you want to extract key phrase extraction, you can all those kind of, or PII kind of information, privacy information. You can also pull those information with custom skills or built-in skills. So once you have this cognitive search, people can do a certain searching capabilities on top of it. And once, let's say, for example, if somebody search for some particular news article, and it gives you, let's say, top 3 newsletter that you have, or newspaper that you have, where the search has been hit. Now, if you want to further summarize that particular newsletter that you have, or perform a little bit more of a in-depth search in which particular area this particular search is applicable for, and you want only particular that paragraph want to show up, you can do all this kind of stuff blended with the OpenAI on top. So this is a very common use case I've been seeing, where you integrate this as part of your chatbot, where you are somebody's asking for certain things, it goes through the searching capabilities, and then you apply the OpenAI after the text has been extracted. You apply that OpenAI on top of it, and then you do similarity search and all this kind of stuff, and then supplement that result with more generative response that you are getting with the OpenAI, and then send it to the end user. So again, this is a very common use case. This is a use case I will have one of the presenter next week. We're going to dive into a little bit more deeper. He has built a end-to-end solution with the UI and everything, and he's going to be showing a little bit more on this one, diving into end-to-end scenario, what he did, how he built it, and more of a coding side of it as well. So he's going to dive into that. So I'm not going to dive into too much on this one, but stay tuned for this one for next week. So again, these are a couple of use cases I just wanted to highlight it to you. So let's jump into a couple of coding side of it. And bring that screen up here. So here are a couple of notebooks I have from samples that we already have published. So you should be able to access it. If not, I can send you the link to these ones as well after that. So quickly walk you through. Is in order to run this OpenAI service, you need to download a couple of OpenAI libraries and all those kind of stuff, just the normal stuff in Python. I already have run this code. I already have applied the key. So basically, you need a key and endpoint in order to connect to your OpenAI service. Once it's connected, you can perform various different tasks, right? So in this case, let's say if I am sending a text and I need to know how many tokens this particular text has it. Basically, it gives you the number of tokens that it is using for this particular text in here. So you can use the GPT-2 tokenizer library here, and then you can get this information. Now, as mentioned, there are various different models you can apply. I briefly talked about each of these models in that which model is applicable for which purposes, embeddings you have, codecs you have, and the text models that you have. So you can apply any of these models. In this case, I'm using this Curie model here. So again, we briefly also covered prompt design aspects of it. So make sure that when you design any prompts, make sure you provide show and tell. Make sure you provide a quality data in your prompt, and make sure you check your settings, right? So check your settings. Normally, if the temperature makes a big difference. So if your temperature is closer to 0, that means you don't want the model to be more, I would say, creative, right, in that nature. So if you're writing the poem on those kind of stuff, you want to keep your temperature a little bit higher, but if you want a more textual-based search, you want to keep your temperature lower. So adjusting this temperature can give you various different responses depending on what your needs are. Make sure you can apply various temperature. So in this case, what I'm showing here is, again, quick example of it. So in order to send any request, you need a completion. Completion is what it formulates your text, what you are trying to send to the model. And you have to define which particular model you want to use. You apply a prompt that you want to send. And then basically, what is the maximum token you want the model to use, right? Again, as I said, everything is token based. Apparently, I did not run some stuff here. So I need to go back and run a few stuff here. did not run that one. Okay, so again here this response back. You ask some question, and the OpenAI responded with this particular model responded some. Again, when you run the same query again, you may not necessarily get the same response depending on your temperature. It can potentially give you a different response. So again, don't expect that the generative nature of OpenAI will always give you the same result. It can differ the results based on the level of temperature that you are using. Different use cases are here as well. You can summarize the text. So you send this particular text here. You want to summarize that text here. So basically what you do here is you send this particular text to the model, set the temperature again, here is 0.7, and you apply that text here, and then you get the summarized response here. If you change this temperature a little bit, then it's going to give you a different response. As I mentioned, it can be a bit more creative or less creative, right, in that nature. So again, this is an example of the text summarization. You can also do the classification. So the way you classify it, you provide a show and tell, one of the things that I mentioned about. So you show that what, give a sample of it, what you are trying to do. A small example here. In this case, here's my categories. Here's my example here. Now, can you apply, and when you apply the prompt, it uses this example for the training purposes, and then basically one short example I would say, in this case. So you provided a one shot, two shot, multiple shots, no shots. So you can provide some example, and then basically once you run this one, it gives you an output based on the categories that you have defined. And in this case, you are asking the question here for one of the laptop keyboard I need to replace, which category this falls under, right? So customer inquiry, and basically it tells you this is a hardware support, right? So again, this categorization or classification can be applied to your particular use case, and you can do, you can specify an example, and then you can define your particular use case in this case, whichever fits best for you. Some other examples here. You can also create a new product name. So you can specify, okay, here's an example of some product names, right? And then you can ask the OpenAI to, let's say you send a product description here and ask it to provide some additional product names, right? So again, it can be creative in nature. You can again set the temperature a little bit higher, so it can be a little bit more creative in nature. And based on that, you can see the response here. The name it suggests is one size, fit one, or one fit, right? So this is one example here. I know we are running short on time. Here is the topic which we're going to cover. I wanted to cover a little bit more on that one. This is a particular use case which is using cognitive search capability blended with the OpenAI. And basically, this use case was you call a cognitive search for certain text. It gives you the response back with the various different news articles. And then basically you want to summarize top 3 newspaper, and then it can give you the output on that. And then you can apply various different operations on top of it once you are extracting certain information out and then sending. So I wanted to run this by you, but again, we are running short in time. But again, stay tuned for this particular specific use case, which one of our colleagues will going to present next week and dive into this particular use case in more details. So any questions? I know we are pretty much close to the time here.
So I didn't see any questions related to the on the opening. So So only few questions about previous sessions asking for the where I can find like all the recordings and everything. So that I can share that YouTube channel link and everything. Yeah. So the next session we can cover the next part of this achievement, the mission learning studio and call and everything. And tomorrow I can host the Azure Back to School with the Divine Netflix. So I will share you the meanwhile in the LinkedIn as well. So you can join the session. Okay. So until then, thank you so much for those who are joining the session. So thank you very much.